very broad, multi-pronged strategy for this part of the world. In broad strokes, how does it sound to you? How will this be accepted in Washington?
It's pretty good because you had to nail all the components of this strategy. President Obama spoke first about Al-Qaeda, then about Pakistan, then about Afghanistan, but also about the fact that the government is corrupt in Afghanistan, the drug trafficking, the aid to Pakistan in civilian monies up to 1.5 billion a year. All those issues are intertwined. I mean, you cannot deal with Afghanistan and forgetting about Pakistan. So at that level, I thought the strategy is very reasonable.
Mm-hmm. At first blush, to many people, in fact, we were thinking this a few months ago, that this was going to be another surge. But it is much more than a surge. There are a lot more troops coming in, yes, but at the same time, it looks like the president really wants the Afghans to take charge of their own destiny, and the NATO people are only there to help and to get them through the next little while, because they have to take charge of their own lives.
That is correct. That's the model that worked in Iraq. The benchmarks are the way to go. President Obama was clear in saying that the US and NATO are not there forever, and that the Afghan people need to take their destiny into their own hands. And that's why the training of forces is vital. Unfortunately, the announcement as far as the numbers is much lower than some expected. The total number is around 216,000, both Afghan army and police forces. Some of the reports that I saw before today were talking about north of 400,000 total security forces.
Sir, these hundreds of civilians that will be directed to go to Afghanistan, this is a real change, because it's been essentially just military people who have been in this part of the world. Pretty dangerous part of the world, of course, but we're sending hundreds of civilians. What are they going to do there?
It's mostly reconstruction, training. The issue is they're going to need to have security first and foremost in order to be able to work and to get credibility near the Afghan people, because there's no way that civilians are going to be effective if Afghans do not feel secure.
You know, it's interesting that the people who actually live in the neighborhood, you know, the Russians, the Iranians, Pakistanis, they need to be more on board, right? Is that the point of this international thrust, this diplomatic thrust? Get the people in the neighborhood to help support this effort and to prop up the Afghans in their efforts to take charge of themselves.
It is correct, but it's much easier said than done. I mean, everybody, including the Russians, the Iranians, are playing a double game. And indeed, on paper, they have the same interest than we do, but on the ground, many things are different. And the Iranians have been, for instance, very troubling in helping the Taliban. So it will be much easier at this point to try to get them on board. But I think the big gorilla is really Pakistan. There's no way you're going to be able to tame down the violence in Afghanistan if Pakistan is still on the way to becoming a failed state.
Yeah, and how close is it to being a failed state?
Very close at this point. You've seen the increase of violence within Pakistan, the problem of the political leadership. But the main issue for the long run, and I think that's what President Obama needs to really underline, is education. The madrasas, some of the extremist Quranic schools are still producing day after day a generation of suicide bombers. And if you don't close down those schools and replace them with secular non-extremist schools, then there's not much we can do.
Yeah. Mr. Guitta, can we accept the fact that this strategy announced today to the world by the President of the United States is essentially a NATO fait accompli, because he'll be taking this message to The Hague next week, right? Or at least the United States will be.
Yes, it is correct. I mean, you noticed that at the end of his speech, President Obama was very clear in putting responsibility also on the shoulders of his partners of NATO, and most probably the Europeans are going to hear about Washington demands of getting more troops and more civilians as well very quickly.
Mr. Guitta, nice talking to you, sir. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And just hours before the Obama speech, at least 50 people